guest, Dr. Sergei Khrushchev, and we're going to be talking about a lot of different topics. But hasn't there been a major event in your life since we last met? You became a U.S. citizen.
Yes, it happened in last July, last century maybe, even last millennium.
This is true.
Long ago it was, but now it's for me, it's for the past, and we are living here now. We are thinking for whom we will vote.
Ah, that's right. I wouldn't ask you who you're going to vote for, but
I still don't know.
Still don't know. Are you looking forward to voting in the elections this year?
Yes, I think that I will have to go because as I became the citizen, I have to make my choice.
Right, and a new experience, which is kind of interesting too in the new country.
Well, maybe I will not too much talk about experience. I think it's important that each of us will just present their understanding of the future and where they want to go, because the country is kind of just swinging from one side to the another, have to go forward.
Certainly does. I hope we have some good choices by the time we get to the election.
Yes.
That's what gets kind of interesting after a while, you know. Was becoming a citizen a difficult decision to make?
No, because, you know, now we are living not during the Cold War, but after the Cold War. So this decision is not cutting me off the Russia.
Right.
And we decided this because living here for last 8 years, now close to 9, once we talk with my wife, will we return to Russia or not?
Mm-hmm.
And when we decided that we will stay here and teach at Brown, and I told her that we have to apply for the citizenship because, from my understanding, if you are living in the country, you have to be responsible for the country. It's very personal. You can live here with the green card. I compare this. Some people like to live at their own home and take care about everything, and sometimes prefer to spend their life living in hotel. And I'm just like the first person. I want to live in my own home, and now it's my home.
And that's the best way to go. Definitely.
I agree with you.
Absolutely. Now, you were the Thomas J. Watson Institute for International Studies at Brown. Let's just refresh people's memory on what the Institute
It is part of the Brown University. It was created at the Center for Foreign Policy Development by Tom Watson.
Mm-hmm.
It's a well-known person, former president of IBM, and he was for 3 years ambassador to Moscow at the beginning of the Afghan war. So when he returned, he tried to think how we can prevent the nuclear holocaust. And so he just set up this institution. It grew, now it became big, and they have different fields. It is the global security, it is world economy, it is environmental problem, it is also education. So we're working in the different direction, and mostly I'm focusing on the two things. First, what really happened in Russia, because it's not enough to replace slogan, our goal communism, to our goal capitalism. Many of Americans think it's enough, but really you have to build effective economical structure.
Definitely.
And Russia, sad to say, is really moving to the opposite direction, and the economy now much worse than it was before in the Soviet time. And the second, I'm working on the history of the Cold War, trying to present people how it's really happened in that time, because we based on our understanding ourselves, and we try to explain the Russia or Russians, Americans on the same basis, but it was different culture, different people. And the second, during the Cold War, it was Cold War, so we could not say anything good about opposite side. You can imagine that in the 50s it will be published in New York Times, President Eisenhower fully wrong, we have joined Khrushchev proposition in United Nations. You cannot, the same in Russia, you cannot think that somebody will publish in Pravda, Kennedy was right in the Cuban Missiles Crisis, Khrushchev was wrong. But the real intention was very different that we present in the Cold War. And in many cases, surprisingly, it was very similar, because when we look at the Iron Curtain that divided us to the two parts, it was also worked like a mirror, reflecting the same way, because even this side will be evil empire, on the opposite side it was also evil empire to that people. And this side, I especially not telling what is this side, well, that side.
Right.
This side, it was fear that that people will start the nuclear war, the first possibility, same fear on that side.
Sure.
We see that on this side, really nobody planning to start the war, they want to defend. But the same on the opposite side, nobody planning to start the war. So I just trying to present the real picture what happened in Soviet Union during my father's time, because even when working now after the Cold War, we are still making mistakes.
That's right.
And it was same based on all these misperception, misunderstanding of the intention of the opposite side, of the consequences of the decisions.
But we can learn from the past, can't we?
Oh yes, of course. Who know past, they can just learn from this and make better in the future. On the present time, it was the best intention to turn to the market economy. And in Soviet Union, it was well effective centralized economy. And the idea was to transform its more effective market economy, not destroy everything. And Americans tried to show that you have to use our example. But Russians are different culture. And through their mistakes, and some, I think, bad intention of some people, they destroyed the economy. That was only half GDP that they had 10 years ago. And the most of the people received only 1/3 of their salaries that they received in 1990. But what is the Russian reaction? They told it's American fault. They just plotted against us. They told do as us, and they brought us to all this disaster. And when you ask now Russians, what does it mean, democracies, they will told it's criminals, it's crimes.
Bad system.
No, it's not bad system,
Criminal.
it's different system. If you are doing something, you have to know that you are just working in the different environment. It's not the aliens, but it is something very different. And I'm trying just to show this through the Cold War, how it's worked. For example, what was really behind my father's decision to deploy missiles in Cuba? It is try to start some offensive against the United States. No, he won't be accepted as the great power equal to Americans.
Right.
And because Castro at that time declared that he will be a socialist, like each great country, first of all, they have to defend all their allies.
Sure.
Because then they will not great country on their side. It was very similar when the year later President Kennedy came to West Berlin and told, I'm Berliner, to show West, East, Soviet Union that if you will try to take Berlin, it will be the nuclear war. Mm-hmm. And Khrushchev tried to show Americans, if you will try to invade Cuba, it will be the nuclear war, nothing more. But it was just accepted in the United States like a great threat. And my father never could foresee this because he thought, based on his own experience, European, when we have all our history, millenniums, enemies on our borders. It was Turks, then it was Germans, Napoleon, all this mess. So we're not too much thinking about technical capability to hit our country, to destroy. We based on the political decision. Will Americans decide to launch their missiles from Turkey, from Italy, from British or not? And if they're staying there, and he thought if he will do it, will be the same in the United States. Mm-hmm. And it was even not Monroe Doctrine, it was not the White House. Americans, all their history, lived protected by two oceans. And there was only one threat, that during the Second World War, they will be attacked by the Japanese balloons. Not very big threat. And now they just face these missiles. and it was unacceptable to them. It's create very different political situation where the White House have to make their own decision, because as I talked with some officials from them, they told, we could accept your missiles. We understood that no difference. You have a couple dozen more missiles here, we'll deploy them in your own territory. But they told, if you will do this, Americans will kick us out from the White House next week. And so they started to negotiate.
Oh, sure.
And negotiating when they had no prepared ground. But the second most important was not this military opposition, but it was first time in the Cold War history, and all Cold War history, when they're not threatened outside by the exercises, just drafting the reservists to the service, sending the strong messages in the newspapers and the TV, but they start negotiate secretly. And it means that they first time trusted each other, that they can trust Kremlin, and Kremlin can trust White House. It is, when we are looking here, it's making the picture very different than it was in the, we know from the history in the Soviet Union and in the United States. And I think that the achievement of the both sides, President Kennedy and Khrushchev, even bigger, because they tried to, first time, to try to work together. And my father told, we'll never be friends. Kennedy defended his system, I defending my system. But we have one in common, we want to save the world and prevent the nuclear war. And it is many such stories in this, my book that I just published. It's not a research, it's my memoirs. How I work with missiles, what my father told me, how I met with him.
I want to get back to that when we come back. We're going to be coming right back. Please stay with us.
Thank you.
We're back with my guest, Dr. Sergei Khrushchev, and we've been talking about your memoirs. Now, I'm most remiss because I haven't even asked for the title of your memoirs.
Oh, the title of my book, it is Nikita Khrushchev and the Creation of a Superpower, and the publisher, the Penn State University Press, and they just now appearing in the store. It came out only 2 weeks ago, maybe 10 days ago. Brand new. I just signed books yesterday in Boston in the Brown Alumni Club.
That's very exciting. How long did it take you to put the book together?
You know, it is not long and long, because the first version that can be published in Russian in 1994, I wrote about a year and a half. And it was a big book, it's about 700 pages.
That's a lot
more.
of work.
But then I rewrote it, I just polish it, and when translated, it was, I add something, I cross out something. So I worked from 1990 just to this time, so it's 10 years.
Wow. That's a major project. Now, being on the inside of such major historical events, do you draw much from memory in the book?
Yes, I try to write about the thing that I was witness, but I do not trust my memory, because I check everything in the archive and the newspapers everywhere, because in many cases you are thinking it was this year and really it was other year, but most of the fact I remembered, and when I checked it was just what I remembered. Even sometimes it was in some not very accurate publication, different figures, mostly in my space work. I worked in the space program for 10 years. But then after that, when I look in the archive, it was the same figures, for example, how much weight you can deliver to the orbit. So I still have strong enough memory.
Oh, I would think, yes. And that would be a very privileged position that you were in during that period.
Yes, and it is important because I'm also talking about the space events in the space race, and I try to explain to my readers that really it was never missile race, never even space race in Soviet Union. It was only American side. Because my father told that because our economy only 1/3 of American, we cannot be equal on the military side. And second, he told we are never planning to fight Americans, because if we think that our system, socialism, will present the better life to the people, why we have to fight and sacrifice our life for better life for Americans? If they will want to join us, they will elect their president as a communist and join us, or not, then they will be somewhere behind us. I'm not talking what really happened. It was, it's the capitalists present better life to the people, but he still told. So he told that we mustn't try to invest as much as Americans, as we don't have enough funding. We have to decide the minimum what we need to our security. And he told it have to be only about from 2 to 500 intercontinental ballistic nuclear missiles. And then he told we will stop building the Navy, and he stopped building this blue water Navy in 1955. In 1963, he told after we will have these missiles, we will reduce our army to 500,000, because he told these people have to work and produce something.
True.
And then he told we'll stop production of tanks and artillery and combat planes, and it will change all the situation, and it could bring us to the end of the Cold War, not in the 80s, late 80s, but in the late 60s. Would he and Kennedy stood in the power longer? And the second, he told if we have to give the best life to the people, his main goal was agriculture, the food production, and living space, building the apartments. And when we talk about race on the Soviet side, everywhere was the poster, we have to catch up Americans in production, meat, butter, and milk per capita.
Sure.
Here was the missile race, there was the meat race.
Big difference.
Big difference, but we
yes.
didn't understand each other, where the real goal. And also he told that it was centralized economy, so the leader was not so much politician. He not so much care about White House in Washington, D.C., but making the technical decision and working with these housing problems, because after the revolution they didn't build houses. It was civil war, then it was industrialization, Second World War that destroyed most of the cities, and then it was situation where in the small room it was no apartments, no houses, of course.
No.
In one room, 150 square feet, and he lives 3 generations, grandchildren, then your parents, and there you can imagine you are married and you are just laying on the floor. On the left side, your grandparents, on the right side, your parents, and you're thinking what you'll do there with your wife.
Really?
So they start to build it. He was more enthusiastic in the new technologies of the building these concrete panels. I remember when he came and he told, weekend I received the invitation from one inventor. He invented new type vibration of this concrete, and then he took me and we were there, spent all the holiday, all the weekend working around. I really was not too much interested, but I want to go with my father.
Sure.
And he just discussed how you vibrate, how is better, try once more than another thing, or go in the mud, because they took from United States the idea that if you will sow potatoes or corn or cotton in squares, there was no chemical herbicide at that time. Then you can just destroy the weeds just through using the tractors on the 2 directions.
Mm-hmm.
And he tried to check it. And it was the square, because you have to just to put the potato on the ground on just measuring distance. But it was the wire. And when you're just pulling by tractor, it's no square. So they look, no square. Then they brought another tractor next week. So it was his real interest.
Oh, sure.
And in this way, maybe the most interesting state for my father was not Massachusetts, but Iowa, because he has his friend, the Mr. Garst, who was the farmer there, and he just visited Soviet Union. He brought the new seeds, and they discussed with my father. And when I visited, I think it was 4 years ago, Iowa, and then I spoke there as I am lecturing, and then I met with the governor. And he told, Mr. Khrushchev, I'm governor for 18 years. I visit all the countries in the world. Nobody know Iowa. When I came to Russia, they told, oh, Iowa, the state from where Khrushchev brought, the most famous American state, from where Khrushchev brought the corn to the Soviet Union.
So Iowa was famous in the Soviet Union
Yes.
before we knew it. That's amazing. Let me ask, now I didn't realize that you had worked on the space program.
Yes, for 10 years.
Tell me something, because this is something that I've always been curious. Why did we have a space race? What are we racing to?
Really, you're racing. We are not racing.
Okay,
But,
what are we racing? Yeah.
You know, it was the shock for America when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first satellite in 1957 on the
Right.
October 4th. Really, Soviet Union, or my father, or the government, they never thought about satellite. They want to be equal. So they need some weapon that can reach American territory. It was only one possibility to build intercontinental ballistic missile. And they just ordered this missile. It was designed. But the designer, Mr. Sergei Korolev, he, like all of us when I worked in another design bureau, wanted, of course, to be famous. And he just thought about the space. And he launched this satellite. We did never expected how world would react it on this.
Certainly did.
So they started, and United States had this feeling that they're ahead of the world, and they was ahead of the world. But now Soviet Union was there, so they tried to have the revenge. And then after the failure of the launch for Sputnik, and then failure to launch send the first man to the space, President Kennedy decided to go to the moon. And there was just the race on your side. On our side, it was still buttermilk and meat.
I think the racing here has gotten out of hand. We're back with my guest, Dr. Sergei Khrushchev, who is with the Thomas Wharton Jr. Institute for International Studies, Senior Fellow.
Yes.
At this point. Now, we were talking before about your memoirs, but you have another very important literary project coming up with your father's memoirs.
Yes, my father dictated his memoirs when he was ousted of power. It was his struggle with the Brezhnev government and KGB. At last, they confiscated it and disappeared. Part of this had been published in this book. In this country, in 3 books, it was Khrushchev Remembers Last Testament, and Khrushchev Remembers Tapes of Glasnost. But it was not everything,
Right.
and it was not very good organized. So now, at last, we published 4 volumes at about 1 million words in Russian last year, and start to work with the Penn State University Press on the translation, these 4 volumes in English. Why it's important? When you look in the history, most of the historian based on the archives. But in the archives everywhere, especially in the Soviet Union, you have the official opinion, point of view. The decisions have been made, and we don't know all the discussion, how it was differences, how life was really there. And my father, maybe it was only 1 memoirs of the Soviet time, was not censored. He told what he really thought, how it's happened. There's 2 books of in the 20th century Russian history, such memoirs, my father's, and the Prime Minister Sergei Vity, who was the Prime Minister in Russian Empire in 1904-06.
Oh.
And he was also under the pressure of the Tsarist secret service and all these things, because they also didn't want them to say truth.
Right.
And both of these books first had been published abroad. My father's memoirs, as I told, in the United States, the Wittes book in Germany, and then it was published in full. So now we will publish it. I'm just finishing raising money for this project because the translation is very expensive. It have to raise it about, I raise about 150,000 now. It need to raise it about 40,000. And we now in the process of the translation. It will take about, publish I think 2 hours, 2 years.
2 years.
I think maybe 4 years.
Don't you wish it was 2 hours?
No, not 2 hours. 2 hours will be only our conversation.
Someday it will be just 2 hours more to go on it.
Oh yeah.
Someday in the future, that's what it'll be. And you say, it was 2 years ago before.
Yes.
So it'll happen. I also wanted to ask you if you've formed any opinion on Vladimir Putin yet.
You know, I'm just focused on the Russian research. I don't have a real opinion about him because, you know, Russia is a different culture. And in the West, we trying to elect the president whom we know, whom we can expect something. But in such desperate situations in Russia now, in 10 years, the GDP fall down about to the 50% what they had in 1990. The salary of the people about 30%. Can you imagine if your salary today will be 30% from 1990? They want something. And they now, I think they want to have a miracle. And you can't expect miracle from the politician whom you know. Can you expect miracle from Gore or Bush? No. So, in the Russian way, they wanted to just elect somebody whom they don't know. And whom don't know can expect miracle. It is some woman told he has so bright eyes, we like them. So he
That's
elected.
what they vote for here.
He elected, and now we'll see later, really, because he did not present his economical program, no political, nothing, because it's the same game. Miracle can go through the economical program, but I think that what now happening, he is now in the office more than 100 days. He was acting president. Still, he did nothing. He talked that he want to do the best to the people, that all the politicians telling all of us. And what he's doing, he's jumping from riding the jet, then to the submarine, then to the cruiser. Last, he just drove the tractor yesterday in one of the rural area in Russia. But it's not enough for the president.
No.
So I became not very enthusiastic about him. I don't think that he can be such authoritarian leader, like Stalin type leader, or his KGB background that I don't like also. He can be such playboy in Kremlin.
Kind of a glamour figure almost.
Yes, just who just taking fun from all these things. When he was colonel lieutenant, you cannot just take the plane and go to the naval base until I want to go by the submarine and watch the launch of the ballistic missile, and then let's go to the cruiser and launch something else.
Right.
And now you can do this.
Now he's in control. I wanted to ask you something that I found kind of interesting. You mentioned that he was from the KGB, which gives him something in common with our former president, George Bush, who was with the CIA. So there's a link there, isn't there?
No, it's no link. CIA, President Bush, it was the position for the politician. The same as the KGB for the Andropov. They came there when they were, grown-up person. And Putin, he started his service in KGB just after the university. So he did not bring to the KGB like Bush his understanding of the service. He just had been trained there, and there how they trained everybody. And as I lived in this system most of my life. I'm scared about these people and their understanding. I think that part of this it is how he managed the Chechen war. I don't think that we have the real easy solution there, like in any such war against secessionist people, like North Ireland or I don't know Sri Lanka. But you have to try. And he told, "No, I will not try." And like the person trained there told, "I will solve this problem through the force." But you cannot solve the problems through the force if everybody hate you and you are not
be done.
fighting against people. And they try to fool themselves, not anybody else, that they fighting not against people, but against international terrorists. And then you can ask why the international terrorists if you think the Chechnya is the part of the Russia. In this case, if they terrorists, it's not proved, they can be domestic terrorists.
True.
But it is part of this old Cold War phraseology that they really pretend they're fighting not against Chechen, but some intruders from the outside world, from the Muslim fundamentalists, they came from Arabia or some others. Of course, we have some such people there, but majority it was the ordinary Chechen people.
True.
They just have this want to make the revenge to the Russians who came there, who burned their houses, killed their relatives. It's part of their nature. They're very different from Americans. They're different from Russians.
Oh, sure. I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It was
It's a
very pleasant for me
pleasure
to
have
be
you.
here.
And good luck with your book. I'm sure it'll
Thank
be a
you.
huge success.
Thank you. I hope.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
I worked so long with this, so I think.
Then it has to be a success. Thank you again for coming. Hope to see you again soon.